Us for more on the situation in the Middle East and what's likely to happen in coming days, we have Jeffrey Sachs, economics professor, best-selling author, innovative educator, UN advisor, and global leader in sustainable development. Thank you so much for joining us at Times Now, Professor Sachs. Now, President Trump has just declared that the US is very close to a deal with Iran, with possible talks resuming in Islamabad this weekend. Given your past warnings about Trump-Netanyahu megalomania, quote-unquote, do you see this as a genuine diplomatic breakthrough or simply a face-saving pause before another round of strikes?
I don't see anything ever coming from Donald Trump as genuine. It may be possible, but it's not genuine. The man lies at every turn, so we have to have a different approach to his statements. It's possible that there could be some kind of agreement. At the same time, thousands more U.S. troops are moving to the region. This is a typical time managing effort as well. They could just as well be bombing Iran next week. I don't listen to Trump other than with some frustration and bemusement, but not for facts.
Right. Now, Trump claims that Tehran has agreed to hand over its enriched uranium stockpile and forgo nuclear weapons entirely. In your assessment, is this a credible and enforceable nuclear concession from Iran, or is it more rhetorical posturing amidst the current ceasefire?
Again, I'm not there. I doubt that this is the case. It could be, but I doubt that it's the case. I don't see, under the circumstances, why Iran would hand over such materials when the United States and Israel are ready to bomb it to smithereens. So I don't see Iran making such concessions. They might. If they do, they will get killed afterwards, most likely.
Right. And Trump has just posted on Truth Social calling the Israel-Lebanon ceasefire a historic day for Lebanon and expects that Hezbollah will act nicely, quote-unquote, during this period. Yet Hezbollah isn't part of the deal. Israeli troops aren't withdrawing, and Netanyahu says it's only to advance peace. Now, the big question is, do you feel that there is some kind of a breakthrough? Of course, the very fact that Israel and Lebanon have sat down at the negotiating table after about 34 years, many are viewing with certain amount of importance. Do you look at it as genuine progress, and is this likely to lead to a broader peace if there is the next round of talks in Islamabad?
Trump's method and Israel's method is to kill the other side, commit mass murder, and then when it stops, say, you see, we are angels of peace, and the other side should be nice. So this is what we hear each day. It's very disorienting. Hezbollah should be nice after Israel has killed thousands of people, destroyed Beirut. Well, maybe the Lebanese government which isn't representing Hezbollah, wants the bombing to stop. That would be understandable. But nothing of this kind is actually stopping the underlying motivation here. Israel wants military control over the Middle East. It's determined to have it. These agreements mean nothing the way that they are phrased, because there's no sign from the United States or Israel, not an iota, of responsibility. Everything belongs to the other side. The other side is evil. They should be nice. They should give in. On that basis, I don't see peace. What I see is continuing aggrandizement by Israel and the United States. So all of these statements are statements of power and bravado. They are not statements of mutuality, concession, compromise. There's nothing like that in any single statement. It's just demonstrations of U.S. power in Trump's mind. And in Netanyahu's mind, it's demonstrations of conquest. Everything else is tactical. Nothing is believable, because there's no demonstration here at all of any kind of mutuality of understanding, whether it is about Iran, about Gaza, about the Palestinians, about anything that formed the underlying causes of this conflict. This is all about demonstrating U.S. power. And now we see it over and over again. You murder, and then you say, I stopped murdering because I'm an angel. You're evil, but you have agreed to be nice.
Now, this is very interesting the way you put it, because US has now imposed and is actively enforcing a naval blockade on Iranian ports while the 2-week ceasefire holds. How do you assess the legality and strategic wisdom of this move, especially as it disrupts completely the Strait of Hormuz and triggers global fuel shortages? Because the US is saying it's Iran who started it by putting in, its own sort of tolls, etc. on ships, and we're going to end that with this kind of a blockade.
Who started what? One day, Israel and the United States started to kill the leadership of Iran and to bomb Iran. That's how it started. And that is my whole point. All of the rhetoric by the U.S. is about power. Trump is a tyrant. Trump believes that the United States can enforce its will. Netanyahu is even worse, I have to say. They both believe that they act with complete impunity. By the way, Trump says so. He doesn't get called out for it, but he says, I can do what I want anywhere. He said yesterday, yeah, Cuba, yeah, that comes next. That's afterwards. They're badly governed. They're terrible people. We're going to have to do something. So it's the same story. This is Hitler speech. You can take it or not take it, but this is what it is. This is not about peace, cooperation, international law. For the United States to invoke international law, oh, Iran can't do that, so that's against international law, is the biggest joke imaginable. It's sick, actually. The United States is the first country to say international law means nothing. This is all about power. They've already said that very explicitly.
Right. And do you think one of the reasons President Trump is now urgently looking for an off-ramp is the growing domestic pressure back home? Because the national average price of gasoline has climbed to $4.09 a gallon, substantially higher than the $3.17 average from a year ago. How much is this economic pain at the petrol pump influencing America's policy in this conflict?
It's a good question. Trump is unpopular. His popularity or approval is declining, not precipitously, I would say. He has a very strong, loyal base, which seems to weather anything. It weathers him attacking the Pope. It weathers him putting his picture that he's Jesus Christ. It weathers gasoline prices above a certain amount. So he has a base that is maybe 35% even of the American public. I don't know exactly what the number is, but it is far below a majority, and his party will lose control in November. How much this is influencing day to day, it's hard to say. There really are indications that Netanyahu has an extraordinary amount of power over the United States. I wouldn't necessarily have said this, but how can a vice president of the United States in the midst of negotiations be taking calls from the Israeli prime minister? This by itself is completely unheard of, totally disgraceful, no matter what the explanation, completely disgraceful. I'm ashamed at my country's government. It's disgusting. Of course, I detest the Israeli government, but I have to say that for a vice president of the United States in the middle of bilateral negotiations to take a call from the Israeli prime minister on its face shows something is seriously wrong. Do these people know what they're doing at all? Are they blackmailed? What is it that's really going on here? But to see that on its face is really beyond belief, actually. No explanation can justify it because it's awful looking. So you don't do it unless you have to do it or unless you're stupid. But somehow it's wrong, terribly wrong.
Right. Now, we've seen the Pentagon come out and say that the Iran war has already cost America over $11.3 billion in just the first 6 days. Looking ahead.
Oh, much. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I was going to say much more than this.
They've sought, I think about $200 billion subsequent to that. But the point I'm just trying to make is how much more is this conflict going to drain U.S. taxpayers? taxpayers? And is this ballooning bill also one of the reasons that Trump is now desperate to get out of this war?
They're not desperate because of this, because all they're doing is adding to the debt of my children and my grandchildren. So these are the most irresponsible people. They don't pay for it by saying to the American people, this is important, you should pay for it. They just add to the debt. Trump is running up the debt at a completely unprecedented rate. Our budget deficit will be more than $7 trillion. I'm sorry, more than 7% of GDP, excuse me, more than $2 trillion. And the debt is just soaring. And nobody, by the way, in Washington pays any attention to it, because there's a very simple rule in Washington. You have to call every day your rich donors because they're funding your campaign. So you have to promise them no taxes on you, no way you're going to be asked for anything. And so the budget deficit just completely widens. And Trump, by the way, submitted a budget a couple weeks ago for $1.5 trillion for the Pentagon, an extra $500 billion, not an extra $200 billion. But it doesn't matter in the funny money world of the United States. Just add it to the debt. So this is actually not a pressing political issue, surprisingly, because nobody's asked to pay for it at all except the future.
Right, and this is a war that's not just costing America, it's hammering the global economy. There's a UNDP report that warns of a 97 to 299 potentially $1 billion of output losses across Asia Pacific, which is about 0.3 to 0.8% of the regional GDP. They've also warned that about 32 million people globally could be pushed into poverty, including 8.8 million in Asia Pacific. How catastrophic is this for countries like India, who bear responsibility for this global economic damage?
Very consequential, and there is a high responsibility. It means one hard job, telling the United States to back off. No leader seems to want to do that, but that's actually what's called for. This is catastrophic, and I have to add, although it's only a probability, there is a rising probability that there will be a very large, they're even calling it a super El Nino, towards the end of this year. If you combine the oil prices, the fertilizer prices, and a super El Nino, we will have a global catastrophe. India will be very hard hit. It's time for India, China, Russia, and others to tell the United States publicly, as well as privately, back off. You don't run the world, and you can't wreck the world. And especially to tell pipsqueak Israel, stop wrecking the whole world out of your visions of your power. This is really something unusual. So yes, the economic consequences will be enormous, undoubtedly. I think they're going to be much higher than people think, because all this sweet talk about peace is most likely meaningless.
All right, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, thank you so much for joining us and breaking this down for our viewers.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.